What if everything you were told about your retirement was, let's just say, not all the way true? Not a lie, not misleading or anything like that, but just not all the way completely true. Now, I've been helping federal employees now for 17 years, and over that time frame, I ask pretty much the same question on every single one of my sessions. When I'm just introducing myself to a family and we're going through our retirement readiness call, the question I ask almost every single time is, "How much do you have in your TSP?" Right. And when I ask that question, most people are happy to tell me what they have because they feel like they're getting ready for retirement. They're diving deep, and they just repeat it back. "Mrs. Smith, I have 150,000, or Mrs. Smith, I got 800,000, or whatever that number is." People just gladly give it because they're there for a service. They're ready to learn more about how they can expand their retirement and retire on time with confidence, like we talk about often. And the next question I have to ask you, what do you have in your TSP, is how much of that is actually yours? And I'll ask you, you're in the audience, how much of your TSP is actually your money? And without fail, the question typically goes, well, dang, I don't know, Mrs. Smith. And most people sit back in their chair and like, well, I've never been asked that question before. And the reason why that question is the real question, and the question you need to be answering yourself as you're taking notes tonight, is because it's true. All of that money is not your money. The person who decides how much money that is ultimately is the IRS, because the IRS has a portion of that money that they're waiting to take. Oftentimes it comes at RMDs. If you need income, it comes at those points. But you have to know how much of your money is actually yours. And that is why tonight's webinar, we're going to talk about taxes. Taxes are the most important thing that you as a federal employee are going to deal with in retirement, especially after the Secure Act that got passed in 2019 and again amplified in 2021. Taxes are your biggest threat, concern, whatever you want to call it, in retirement. So tonight we're going to talk about taxes. So yesterday I was having a conversation with the client, and we're starting her process of going over her numbers. And she's a client, but she had been talking to us for some time. And she said every single seminar is pretty much the same, but the thing they never talk about is the taxes the way you just talked about it. They talked to me about my FEGLI, they talked to me about my pension, they talked to me about basic budgeting stuff, but they never mention taxes and tax strategy. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that in a way that is the Fed legacy way, in the way that we help and support our clients in navigating tax strategies to make sure that you retire on time with confidence and keeping more money in your pockets, right? I'm going to do something that I don't normally do, is I'm going to walk you through our retirement analyzer software. I'm going to give you a scenario of a person that has tax efficiency versus a person that does not have tax efficiency. And what I'm going to do is this is a real client story. You can kind of think for yourself on how this would impact you based on what you have going on. And at the end, we'll ask questions. If you have questions about the specific scenario that we run, put your questions in the chat. My team is in the chat. They'll see those questions so that we can come back to it at the end. Because what I want to do is I want to show you the real results that actually make a big difference when it comes to your retirement planning. We were talking to a client Monday night, me and one of my advisors, and we were having a call with husband and wife, and we ran a tax scenario for them. There was a difference of $900,000 in money that would be saved versus having a tax strategy and not having a tax strategy, right? And so what I want to do is show you all that today. So here is my screen. I'm going to share with you our actual software. So it's right in front of my face the whole time. Okay. So we call this our retirement analyzer software. This software allows us to run inflation reports, expense reports, taxes, you name it, Social Security reports, RMD reports, you name it. This software allows us to properly plan your retirement. Once we get the data, we're able to put this in, and we're able to run a million scenarios. In this situation, obviously I've changed the name. What I want to walk you through is how we can implement tax strategies and what the end of the road will look like based on having a tax strategy and not having a tax strategy. So as you can see here, I have two scenarios. I have a current scenario and I have a tax efficient scenario, right? And so what I want to do is I want to show you exactly how we put this in here. We get your name, we put your birthday, we put all that stuff in there, we state you're retiring in. And this particular lady was retiring in North Carolina. And so once we get that information, we then bid out the scenario. And so when it comes to tax efficiency, you got your standard pension, you have your standard Social Security income, your Social First supplement. This lady in particular had a first supplement. And so we put all the information in there. And as we put that information in there, We then go to the asset page. She told us what she has in her TSP, what percentages in different places, and then we put her amount in her TSP, right? She's retiring. We did that. We ran an analysis on what the return on what her investments, the way it was divvied up. It came at around a 6.5%. In her situation, she had 100% of her money in what we would call qualified money, which is money that's tax deferred. If you have a bunch of your money in the traditional TSP, then that's where that would sit. And so what the software spits out is it lets us know the tax types of her money. In her situation, she had 100% of her money in qualified accounts. And so that's what that means. That's what that is, right? And so what our software will automatically do, it will then calculate when she has to do what's called required minimum distributions. And so required minimum distributions are her based on her date of birth start when she turns 70. It starts when she turns 75. She doesn't have to start paying them until she turns 75, right? That's when the first RMD is forced to be distributed from her TSP. And so as you see, and I always talk about this as you as federal employees, when you're seeking advice from financial advisors or retirement planners or whoever you're talking to about retirement, you have to remind them that as a federal employee, your retirement is going to look a lot different than most people's, than 90% of the population who are not federal employees. Because as federal employees, your 401k is not something that you use the majority of it for income, because as a federal employee, you have a pension and your Social Security that for the most part can cover a lot of your bills. And so in her situation, she was a little short early on. I want to get into the details around that. But once her Social Security kicked in, it made her life a lot easier because, it bridged that gap for her, right? And so that as she kept aging, her bills dropped a little bit. But as you see here, the main point I want to make is her TSP, even though it started off at 500,000, over time it continued to grow, which we often see with most federal employees. And if you have a lot of money in your traditional TSP is going to continue to grow, but so does the portion that the IRS is owed, right? So in her situation, let's say at 509,000 when she started, let's say the IRS, the tax rate that she was at was 20%, then that's their 20% is let me do the math. I don't want to get too lost in the math here, but let's just say, for example, that 529, 20% of it, that is 101,000 was still owed to the IRS. Now, as you see, her balance keeps increasing, but the money that she owes the IRS is still in here. So the higher this amount grows, the higher her RMDs, the more that she will owe the IRS once she gets to that required minimum distribution age. Not only that, the higher her income gets, the higher her tax bracket can be, right? Because she's getting cost of living increases every year as well. So that's that situation. That's that scenario, right? So at 74, she starts taking the RMDs. Now, here's a scenario, and I'm gonna walk through this, of what we would do in a tax efficiency way, right? And what you can do. And so the tax efficient way is to say, okay, and again, income is still the same. The assets we divvy up a little bit. We say, okay, now that we know we want to do some tax planning, let's move some money around so that we can start doing some efficient tax planning, because you want to be efficient in it. And what I mean by efficient, you want to be looking at your tax brackets and moving money to the Roth IRA based on what your taxes bracket are. When it comes to us, what we do, we make sure we get with our in-house CPA, look at your tax returns, look at other tax savings opportunities that may exist within your family. Make sure you execute on those. And we would do that review for free of charge, right? As long as you're a client of ours. We'll do that review, make sure we make some little tweaks here and there. If you want us to do your taxes, we could do that. That's a separate conversation. But overall, we always look at your taxes because we want to make sure you're doing the proper Roth conversions. And once we do that, what we do is we look at the tax plan, and then we'll convert a certain amount of money based on what you have left within your tax bracket. And so in this situation, it was $60,000, right? And so every year we would convert $60,000 from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA that we helped her set up. And so once that happened, here's what becomes the difference. We look at the long-term view of her retirement accounts, and here's what we found. Again, same rate of return, because we kept the rate of returns even, just for the illustration point of view. And here's what happens. This is at age 90, because her money again continues to grow, right? But overall, here's the principle. In this situation, which is the tax efficient model, she has 100% of that money now is converted to a Roth IRA. This is at 1.6 million. Now this is at age 90. This is if the money continues to grow. Things like different things can affect this, but it will affect it on both sides. But if she didn't touch the money, her money would be at 1.6 million at age 90, which is 30 years from now because she's 60 now, right? And that's at a 6.5% interest, right? At that point, she would have $1.6 million in her account. With the traditional IRA, I mean, if she would have just keep things the way what things were going, with the money with doing the RMDs, not really doing any efficient tax planning, she would still have that 1.6 million. The difference is this though. The 1.6 million, if you see this red bar here, 60% of that is still considered qualified money because she's still owing these RMDs because they're not taking all the money out every year. And so she's 976,000 in qualified money. Now, at that point, she still may owe 20% in taxes. 20% of 900, 1.6 million of 973,000, sorry, is $194,000, right? That she still owes. But here's the kicker. We always talk about, and that's worst case scenario. Here's the kicker. We often talk about legacy, inheritance, and things like that. If this money were to go to her kids, it creates a whole nother situation. Because of the Secure Act, there's what we call the 10-year rule. And the 10-year rule works for anybody that's a non-spouse that inherits your money, right? That could be a spouse that's deceased, things like that, or chronically ill beneficiary, things like that. They are able to be waived from this. But the 10-year rule says this: any account inherited, they have 10 years. They have 10 years after the original owner passed away to be able to take money from that account, right? You have to empty the account within a 10-year period. And so as that money is continuing to grow, you're withdrawing from that money. If you have a child in that situation with her, that child would have to take $97,000 a year from this account because that's 10%. But the money's still growing. And so what ends up happening in that scenario, which makes it can drive the taxable revenue way up, is this. When you look at tax brackets, when you're in your highest earning years, right? When most people are in their 50s, mid 50s, things like that, when their parents pass away. If you're in your highest earning years, and all of a sudden now you're inheriting $97,000 a year from an account or your kids are inherited $97,000 a year in that scenario while they're still working, it drives their tax bracket into the higher tax brackets. And so now their personal income tax is taxed higher because they're looking at it as income because there's no way around that. And the money that they're receiving from you also is in this higher tax bracket. So who wins in that scenario? The IRS. And so the goal is to make sure that when you do proper tax planning, when you leave your kids this money, it looks like this, where 100% of that money is in a Roth account. This is how you build wealth. This is something that we take our time and we make sure we deliver to our clients, right? This is something that you deserve. Having a strategy like this makes a ton of difference. And here's why it's super important for you as a federal employee. As a federal employee, when you retire, your income goes from here to here, right? And so when you drop like that, you drop into lower tax brackets. And that's great, right? Because you're in a lower tax bracket, you now can convert this money at a lower tax bracket than you could when you were working. And so oftentimes people ask now, especially now with the new Roth conversion window open with the TSP, it's like, oh, should I do this? And the best time to do that is when you retire, because if you do it when you retire, now you're being taxed at a much lower tax rate. You can control it. It doesn't impact your income, and you're able to convert more money to yourself than what you pay for the IRS. Because once you convert that money over to the Roth, now, and I can show you an example, as in this scenario, tax efficient scenario, now as your money's growing, and here's the tax conversions that we do, right? Now as your money's growing, and it will continue to grow, now all this money is yours. So it doesn't matter where you go, where it grows to. This money is yours. And so that helps you in a couple of different ways. It helps you if you have a long-term care issue. That money now is tax-free when you need it. And so I've had clients who are dealing with the sick spouse. Like when Mrs. Smith, I need to take money out of my TSP, and those clients, some of them hadn't done any Roth conversions or anything like that because they just had their money for so long. They're so, like, it's just it's harder for them to do it at that point. And when we meet, it's kind of too late. But we help them process those things. But some of the things that they're facing is, all right, they need money out of their TSP, they need a larger sum, but now when they take that larger sum, they're having to take more because now it's pushed them into a higher tax bracket, right? And it has a whole bunch of effects because of that. They might have higher Medicare costs because now their income is higher. It can impact a bunch of their Social Security is taxed at a higher rate. So certain things you have to think about. But once you have that Roth set up, now when you need large sums of money, you can go in, take that money, and you're not answering to nobody. You and your kids, right? So it just gives you a whole lot of peace of mind. But you want to have a proper tax strategy set up because now the way the IRS has changed the rules, you almost have to do it because it's just a backdoor way of them now being able to siphon money out of your inheritance that was once going to your kids to pay down, stuff the Trump administration had designed that Secure Act to do. And so you just want to be smart around this stuff and make sure that when you're retiring, you have a tax strategy because it can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars doing it the right way. So Sheila says, am I correct that once you're retired, you can't add to your Roth? So Sheila, once you retire, you cannot add to your Roth. You're correct about that. Your Roth TSP, I should say. But if you move money to a Roth IRA, you can add money. And that's a great question because oftentimes people say, well, Mrs. Smith, I heard that there's a maximum of 6,000, 7,000 I could put in the outside Roth. Yes, if you're contributing to it from your bank account, that is the case. But if you're contributing from an account that's a qualified account, former employer account, there's no limit to what you can put in there, right? So we've had clients, they'll move, let's, for example, say 200,000 to a traditional IRA. And then what we'll do is we'll say, okay, we're going to convert 45,000 a year into the Roth IRA that we just opened so that you're converting money on an annual basis. That's way above what you can contribute if you're just putting money from just your bank account into the Roth, right? But if it's coming from a qualified place, you can there's no limit. There's no limit to that. But that's a great question and a question that we see asked all the time. Another question that we get is, well, what's the difference between doing a Roth conversion with a private IRA and the TSP? And the difference is with the TSP, they require you to pay the taxes out of pocket, cash, whereas with outside IRAs, who's just been around and doing conversions for a lot longer, we look at your effective tax rate because TSP takes a fixed 20%, but that's not actually what you owe, right? We'll see what the effective tax rate is, and it might be something like then the remaining balance of after the taxes are taken out will get put into the Roth IRA, and then from then on, as that money grows, you're no longer subject to taxes on that money. And one caveat though, the account you have to have a Roth IRA open for 5 years because there's a 5-year IRA rule. So you do have to have an IRA open for 5 years. That's why it's important to start an IRA as soon as you possibly can, Roth IRA, as soon as you possibly can, because you want that 5-year window to start so that you're not subject to that 5-year rule as soon as you retire. But even if you're retiring in the next year, so it's okay. It's good to start it whenever, but the sooner you can start it, the absolute the better. Another question was, can you put money into your TSP once you retire? So when it comes to the TSP, when you retire, you can't put money in there either. Well, you can't put any continual payments like you're doing now, right? You can't do that. But if you keep money in your TSP, and let's say you get another job working for a contractor or something, and you have that 401k for 5 years or so, and now that account is $50,000, but you want to keep your TSP open, you can roll that money in to the TSP and you could do it that way. But if you're like working a job and you want to say every month I want to contribute $1,000 to my TSP, you can't do that. But you can contribute. You can roll over, but which was considered a 401k rollover into the TSP. That is a way you could put money into your TSP, but that money has to be qualified money, like what I'm talking about, like money that the taxes hasn't been taken out as such. You can go to fedlegacycall.com and we'll make sure that we'll book a call. And what we will do is we'll set up your different scenarios. We'll set up your current scenario because it's always good to see where you are in retirement. And then from there, what we'll do is we'll build you a tax efficiency scenario. And we always do that because, like I mentioned, you can save yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars by having a tax efficient plan. And not having one, you're just giving money to the IRS, right? You're just giving money to the IRS. And so, we always talk about, especially when as soon as you retire, you have a planning window, of about definitely about 10 years for sure, right? Where your taxable income is going to be at the lowest possible it could possibly be, and your TSP is going to be growing. But once you get to that 73, that's the minimal age. It can go all the way up to 75, depending on the year you were born. Once you get to that age, the IRS takes control. And they're like, all right, you haven't paid us anything yet. Thank you for letting this money grow to such a large number. We really appreciate you. Now we need to get our portion. The best time to get that done is early on when that balance is low. If you remember from our example, when she first retired, she was at 509,000 in the example. That money grew over time, and all we had was at a 6% average rate of return. Most people get higher than that with proper planning. And so as that money grows, and it grows in retirement, I can't tell you how many people are retired, and we do our annual check-in, and we're talking to them. It's like, Mrs. Smith, I can't believe it. My money's just continuing to grow. And that's what you want. But what you want to do is you want it to be your money that's continuing to grow, not the portion that's the IRS's portion. And I cannot stress that enough because, a couple years ago, they pushed the IRS back. They pushed the RMDs back, and people thought, well, that's great. They pushed the RMDs back. Great for who? It's great for the IRS because now they have 2 more years of growth in your money that is ultimately their tax revenue. And at any point, they could change the tax laws. Yes, Trump just made some changes, but it could change again in another 4 years. And who knows what that change will be. But at the end of the day, that impact is going to be impacted on you because they can say how much money is in qualified accounts across the country. There's reports they can say, okay, there's $1 trillion in qualified accounts. We need X amount of money to fund these programs. Let's change up these tax laws. That's what they did with the 10-year rule. The 10-year rule, you used to could delay those out until you, as inheritor, the person that's inheriting the money, to your RMD ages, to 72, 73. Now you got 10 years. That didn't exist 5 years ago, 6 years ago. 10 years ago, right? But that money that has been invested is money that you've been investing for 20, 30 years. But they just changed the rule that completely changes how that's paid out to your beneficiaries. And you had no say in it technically. But now that's a big deal. And so these are the strategies that you have to maintain so that you hold on to your money and you control where your money goes, when it goes to the people you want. And so it's one of the things we definitely would do for you, help you put out a tax efficient strategy, because if you don't have a tax efficient strategy, you best believe the IRS will create one for your money. And that's what you don't want. You want that money. You worked hard, you worked long, you've been smart in saving your money, especially hopping on calls like this and reading and things like that. So you book a call with us. You can just put plan in the chat. You put plan, the team will know to reach out and schedule a call with you. When we hang up, when we end this call, you'll also get a survey. And on that survey, you can book a call. And so again, tax efficiency will save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in retirement that is going to be there anyway. It's either going to go to you or it's going to go to IRS. You just have to be smart about how it's done. Because again, you're saving the money. You're saving the money every 2 weeks. That's your money that you're saving. The IRS is just going to get their portion as it grows, right? And so is there any more questions in the chat? Let me see. Okay, I think we answered everything. So we'll see you all here next week. We're here every Wednesday. If you want to book a call, again, go to fedlegacycall.com or put plan in the chat. We'll make sure we get you on a call so we can build a tax efficient strategy for you. All right, y'all. Talk to you later.